Now 250,000. Now I'm going to get 275. High, I'm going to get 275. 3. Now 300,000. Now 3 1/4, 325. High, I'm going to get 3 1/4, I'm going to get 325. Now half. Now I'm going to get 300. And welcome to the Mike McGavel Jones Show. We're going live today from the middle of the United States of America in Dallas, Texas. And we welcome you to Lincoln Center, right across from the Galleria. We're right off of 635 and the North Dallas Tollway. And we welcome you to the show today. A lot of stuff going on. We got a great guest with us as well. A few shout outs, a couple of interesting things going on. As most of you know, I've been in the auction business 42 years. And it was a big weekend for auctions. And, I noticed that yesterday they said that a 1959 Martin D18E guitar that was played by Kurt Cobain back in 1993, he did a performance on MTV. It was called Unplugged. And that guitar sold for $6 million. And I can tell you right now, I can't imagine any other way you could get $6 million for a guitar other than at auction. And so that was impressive. Now, that was what was reported by the news. In fact, I saw it this morning on the morning news. What they didn't tell was some of the other items that sold in that auction. And the day before, a guitar that was played by Prince on the Purple Rain Tour and a couple of others, it brought $563,500. So two very expensive guitars. And then a belt, a macrame belt that Elvis Presley wore 30 times during his tours, sold for $298,000. So, pretty impressive weekend for auctions, and I always like to turn on the news on a Monday morning and hear about records that are broken. Today is June the 22nd of 2020, and we had a lot of rain here in the Midwest, and Oklahoma's been sending it down to us just about every day, and so we've had our fair share of rain. I do want to give a shout out to Scott Drotty. Over the weekend I received this book, and this book is about Jimmy Capps, and if you watched the show, I guess it was a week ago, we did a feature on a guitar, and that guitar was signed by 25 or 30 of the greatest country music people of all time, people like Loretta Lynn. Anyway, the name of this book is called The Man in Back, and that's Jimmy Capps, and Jimmy had signed that guitar, and it's a very rare guitar because it was signed by probably two of the greatest guitar players of all time, and Jimmy Capps being one of them. He Stopped Loving Her Today, and The Gambler, and a bunch of other hits. And the other thing, Ernest Tubbs, lead guitar player, was also on there. And so it's a cool guitar, but I really appreciate the fact that Scott Drotty sent that to me and sent me a nice note. So Scott's one of our graduates from our auction school. And speaking of auction school, we do have, of course, we own America's Auction Academy, which we just wrapped up the very first ever virtual auction school ever done in anywhere. And then we have Worldwide College of Auctioneering, and that class is coming up July the 31st through August the 7th, and we'll be headed up to Des Moines, Iowa for that class. And in fact, I had about a 45-minute conversation with Paul C. Bear, the former owner, and of course the first international champion auctioneer, and he's going to be joining us over in Des Moines for that class. So he wanted to tell everybody, if you want to come see him, that's the place to come. And anyway, we're excited about it. Today's guest is a guy that I've known for a good while. We haven't got to spend a lot of time together, but we get to see each other from time to time, usually in Washington, D.C., or at one of the National Auctioneers Conference and shows. And we're honored to have with us Congressman, House of Representatives member Jeff Duncan from South Carolina. He's in the 3rd District in South Carolina. And I want to say good morning to Jeff.
Good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show, man. I tell you what, it's great doing this with you. It's great hearing about the weekend auction sales and the guitars and other things that have sold. You said it well. You can only achieve those prices through the auction method of marketing, where you bring buyers and sellers together to establish a price. And I did that for 16 years and love the profession.
Well, we have a mutual friend, Billy Long from Springfield, Missouri. He's our other auctioneer in Congress, but you've been very supportive of the industry, and we appreciate when you've come and visited with us, and also addressed our conference and show, and being an advocate for us as well when we have our day on the Hill in Washington, D.C. And I want to thank you for that as a past president of the association. So thank you very much for that. I want to just have kind of a one-on-one with you today. That's the great thing about these Skype and Zoom and all these different ways we can get together. You're such a busy guy. We're not going to have an opportunity for you to fly here. And so having an affordable meeting and being able to find out what's going on and have you a part of it is super special for us. So the first thing I want to ask you is, so when were you born and where were you born?
Well, before I answer that question, I do get to Texas quite a bit. I'd love to come to the studio sometime when I'm passing through Dallas. I am an honorary Texan. Governor Abbott made me an honorary Texan thanks to Jody Arrington's efforts there. I spend a lot of time and money in Texas, usually on hunting trips. So I'm a proud honorary Texan. And Texas and South Carolina has, I think, a kindred spirit. If you think about Alamo, the commander at the Alamo, William Barrett Travis, was from my district in South Carolina, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that, but he was from Saluda, South Carolina, and went out and fought and died at the Alamo after penning a great letter where he drew a line in the sand. So I'd love to come on your show saying that. I was born in 1966 in South Carolina, just up the road in Greenville.
Did you tell me about your family? Tell me about what your mother and father did back then when you were born.
Yeah, sure. My dad was in textiles, and he was in management of textiles, so he was very good at what he did. The companies he worked for used him as a turnaround guy. They would send him to operations that weren't very profitable, and he would turn that operation around, make it profitable, usually about a 2 or 3 year period, and then they would send him somewhere else. And so I grew up in the textile industry from a small 4-room mill house when I was born to my dad becoming plant managers and assistant vice president running operations for larger textile companies. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was a typical housewife in the 1960s and 70s, early 80s, before she went back to work as my brother and I went to college. She, I guess, maybe was looking for a way to do a little bit more, so she ended up doing some work at hospitals in women's advocacy there. So my dad passed away in 2015, Mike. He had Alzheimer's, and I'm a strong advocate for Alzheimer's research and the Alzheimer's Association, and I ask others to as well. I know the auction industry is really focused on St. Jude's Medical, but in your individual lives, if you're watching this, if you're looking for a charity, Alzheimer's is a terrible disease. I watched it with my father. He passed away 5 years ago. My mom lives about a mile up the road, so I get to see her almost daily when I'm back in the district.
Been a big advocate. I've always been a big advocate of Alzheimer's research, and I've always felt like we have been. It's been, I have to be careful what I say because I don't want to say it wrong, but I just think we've really overlooked something that affects so many families. In fact, I almost have no friends that have not been affected by Alzheimer's and dementia and things of that nature. And sometimes it's both parents, which makes it even doubly hard. It's hard enough to lose one, but then when you get the other one in the same boat. So I appreciate your comments about that. So you have siblings, do you?
Yeah, I have one brother. He's 3 years older than me. He actually lives in the district. I have 11 counties in my congressional district, and he lives up near Clemson University. We're both Clemson University graduates. We both played football at Clemson, both walk-ons. He was a defensive back. I was a wide receiver. He ended up going on to become a graduate assistant coach there at Clemson under Danny Ford, and then got out and is in manufacturing now and been in manufacturing his whole career. I played for about 2.5 years and saw the writing on the wall, did not know what college was about. So really left the team to experience what college was about, excelled in college, got out, became a banker, and then got in the auction business after my banking career.
So how do you transition from banking to auctioneering? You're not the only one that I've known to do that. I've got several friends. In fact, one of my very first auction schools that we had, oh gosh, what was it, almost 30 years ago. There was a gentleman named Gene Cobb from Oklahoma, and he'd been a banker. And he was obviously a frustrated banker, and he was hiring all these auctioneers back during the RTC days and FDIC, and when we had some of the downturns. And he said I could just see that these auctioneers were making more money than I was, and he got tired of hiring, just decided to become one. So how did you transition from banking to auctioneering?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Around that same time in the early 90s, after the RTC days, I had a auctioneer who used to call on me for bank properties and leads of people that I may or may not have known that needed to sell property. And one day he left the Southeast regional firm that he was working for to start his own company. He came to see me because I had loaned him some money on a real estate deal. He wanted to give me his business plan, let me know how he was going to pay the loan back. And we got to talking. I said, look, looks like you're going to have sales associates in all of these southeastern states. Are you looking for someone for South Carolina? And he said he was. So we, expanded that conversation. I ended up going to work for his company for about 3 years. And then being pulled from South Carolina to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, all the way down to Lafayette, Louisiana, and a lot of places in between, I decided to really pull back, focus on just the state of South Carolina, started my own company, and did that for quite a long time until I ran for and won the congressional seat. So it was great being in the business. I love the business and was successful in it. Had a traditional real estate firm as well. That's how I really got to know Mike Jones, was a United Country. We had a United Country franchise for a period of time, and looking for a different brand in the area. It was not really in South Carolina at the time, Mike. And so we were looking for a brand. I liked the United Country idea, logo, and company in general. Before I knew they had an auction division, it was right around the time they were starting the auction division, to be quite honest with you. And so it was a great career.
Well, I know that, you mentioned United Country. And of course, I'm still affiliated with United Country, running United SCS, which is Strategic Client Services. And but that's exactly right. That's how I remember the first time I ever heard Jeff Duncan's name was when you were with United Country. And I had a conversation with Dan Duffy, who, of course, brought me on board with United Country to start the auction division. And he called me this morning from Love Field. He just landed. He's going to be here in Dallas the next 2 or 3 days. And when this podcast is over, I'm going to be downstairs in our office in Building 3 with Dan and probably have a few lunches and breakfasts with him. But I'll be excited to tell him that I had you on the show this morning, and you mentioned United Country, because we've all had quite an investment in that company the last 14, 15 years, which is amazing. I can't believe, I ran my own company for 27 years and then joined United Country, and now I've been there 13, 14 years. So that's time just flies by, buddy.
Yeah, well, tell Dan I said hey, and it was a great company. We enjoyed our experience. We parted ways just because the traditional real estate side of my business was not taking off like I wanted it to, and that wasn't anything about the company. That was more about our local area and the competition that we had, or the lack of real estate sales. I really needed to turn my attention back to the auction business and get away from the traditional private sale. And so that's really at the time. It was really dividing my time. I was in state government. I served in the state legislature for 8 years before coming to Congress. And so I was juggling a lot of balls. I had the traditional real estate firm. I had an auction business. I was serving in the state legislature, and I was running for Congress all around the same time. And it was quite a plate full.
Sure. So you decide you want to get into politics, so you run for state government. How did you make that decision? What caused you to do that? Not everybody does that,
Yeah, so I studied political science at Clemson, and I was always interested in politics. A state representative in our area decided to retire in 2002. and I was asked to consider running. I was very well known in the area and been involved in the Chamber of Commerce and, just all kinds of different Red Cross. I could name a whole litany of organizations in the area that I was involved with. So I knew so many people, and I guess I had gained enough respect for them to want me to go to Columbia and represent them in the state capitol. So I did that. I ran in 2002, won easily, started serving in 2003. In the state legislature, did that up until 2010 when I gave it up at the end of that term, and I won the congressional seat in 2010, started serving in Washington in 2011. And so I brought some real estate experience. I brought small business owner experience. I've signed the front of many paychecks, and most people that I serve with now have never signed the front of a paycheck. They signed the back of a lot of them when they cash them, but they never created that job. They never had to worry about funding that account to cover that payroll. They never had to meet the expenses of a business. And that's a shame, really. That's, I think, part of the problem in Washington is too many people that serve there have not had to navigate the bureaucratic red tape, the regulations that go along with starting a business and running a business, and trying to keep a payroll funded and keep people employed. All the things that folks are watching your podcast fully understand every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting when you're an entrepreneur and you start when you're young and you actually understand what it takes to meet a payroll and manage people. It's I find it interesting when you read the bios of a lot of our politicians in Washington and in the state house too. Some of them they come from families of privilege, and it's just kind of they step into the role and they have the money to roll their way in, and we have a major infection of that in Washington right now. So we've got elections coming up, and there's all I find one thing that has always bothered me, Jeff, and I'm pretty vocal about this stuff. I think it's a shame that you guys, Billy, all the others, have to work so hard to raise money, and it takes so much of your time. And I've had these conversations with other folks that serve, and it's a pity that you have to spend so much money to get elected to a job that quite frankly has become something different than what it was. It disturbs me how people treat a lot of the elected officials. Most people in Washington are there for the right reasons, and most people in Austin, Texas, or wherever you happen to be from, they're there for the right reasons. But then there's always going to be somebody that's not, and it only takes one or two to kind of ruin the water for everybody. So I appreciate you've always been very. I was talking to somebody, in fact, a friend of mine this morning. I was talking about you, and they know you, they know of you, and the comment that was given to me was that you're very smart, you're very articulate, you study, you can tell you know your stuff, and you don't take your position for granted, and you're not there for the show. You're there to do the deal. And speaking of that, tell me some things about the committees that you work on. I know you're very, very strong on energy and the oil industry and other types of energy. And why don't you tell me your experience in that area and kind of when you got into some of these committees? I read some of the subcommittees you've been on, but I also know energy is a real passion for you. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so when I came to Congress, I ended up on 3 committees. I ended up on the Committee on Homeland Security, which was an honor to serve on as we talked about in the post 9/11 world about how to keep America safe. Talked about the extremism that was out there, and this was during the latter years of the Obama administration, and so we challenged Janet Napolitano and Eric Holder and a number of others on keeping America safe. And then as the Trump administration came in, working with them about Homeland Security and making sure that was a priority. I was also on the Committee on Natural Resources, which fit in with the utilization of the natural resources that we have in this country, both on the energy side, but also just protecting. I'm a strong conservationist, protecting the wide open spaces and beautiful places that we have across this country, and making sure that the American taxpayer had access to property that they own. That is, there are great public lands out there, but also understanding that the federal government owns a tremendous amount of the West, and looking at how the federal government might be able to divest itself of some of those holdings and expand or enhance the bigger holdings that they have. So that was a great committee to be on. And then the third committee I was on at that time was the Foreign Affairs Committee. And that was during the time of Benghazi. That was during the Iran deal with the cash for the prisoners and what we all know that the Obama administration did in the middle of the night with large sums of cash in Iran and the Iran nuclear deal going on at the same time. So I was involved in a lot of that. But then about 3 years ago, I was moved to Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the largest and broadest jurisdiction committees in Congress. So we handle anything from energy to healthcare, everything in between, telecommunications and oversight of HHS. We handle the environment, whether it's Yucca Mountain or whether it's just PFAS and chemicals used in firefighting equipment and whatnot. So there's a broad jurisdiction in Energy and Commerce Committee. I'm happy to serve on that committee. It gives me the opportunity to really work on the issues that are important to me. You mentioned energy. Americans' energy independence and Americans' energy renaissance has been a passion of mine. Utilizing the resources we have here in this country to lessen our dependence on foreign sources of energy and expanding that's onshore and offshore energy production. But it's not just oil and gas. It's also the expansion of nuclear power and what we can do. South Carolina gets about 59% of our electricity generated from nuclear power. Nuclear power is very important. And if you think about lowering our carbon footprint and thinking about climate change and whatnot, nuclear power is going to play a big part of that. And so how can we look at what the next generation is for nuclear power, whether it's small modular reactors, whether it's thorium or molten salt reactors, and then understanding there is waste generated into the nuclear power generation. And so where does that waste go? Studying Yucca Mountain, going out and visiting it, understanding the issues, understanding how we led up to choose Yucca Mountain as the nation's repository and what we do going forward, knowing that Yucca Mountain right now is sitting in mothballs. And how do we restart that, or what do we think about for the future of nuclear waste? So there's a lot of issues that I'm working on energy and commerce. All the while, I co-chair what's known as the House Energy and Action Team. The House Energy Action Team, or HEAT, H-E-A-T, is a committee that was stood up under Kevin McCarthy, I believe, in 2011 or 12. I was a part of the initial House Energy Action Team, and now I co-chair it with Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma. And we're really focusing on all of the above energy. We're focusing on, of course, fossil fuels, oil and gas industry, onshore, offshore. We've had a lot of challenges this spring with what the Saudis and the Russians have done and how that has killed production in the United States. It's ended up laying off a lot of the oil field workers and natural gas field workers, and what the future is going to look like in a post-OPEC plus one environment as we try to get the economy kick-started and need those resources, transportation fuels primarily, to restart the economy. So, the House Energy Action Team is a great vehicle for us to push energy policy, and it's an America First energy policy, understanding we've got the resources here. Texas knows it as well as any other state. Oklahoma and Louisiana, to each of your sides there, know it as well as any other states. Those three states are huge energy producers, and we are trying to support that as well as supporting innovative technology up in the Bakken with fracking, hydraulic fracturing, and transportation of those resources down to the refineries so that they can produce all the miraculous things that come out of a barrel of hydrocarbons. So it's a great committee for me, and it's something I'm very, very passionate about.
Well, I know you are. And so there's several other subjects I want to talk about. I do want to talk about this COVID-19 thing. As I almost say it in a condescending way. But it's such a bizarre thing. This is like the perfect storm for our economy and for just everything. If you look at the United States, people are coming out of their homes. Some of them have, a lot of them haven't been out in 3 months. They just stay there. They don't come out. And in the meantime, the world is changing. The country is changing. There's a lot of disruptions and things that are happening across the United States, here in Texas, in South Carolina, in New York, in Washington, and I keep a pretty good monitor on what's going on across the United States. I'm a newsie. I watch all the news. I know some people only like to watch one news, but I do watch a lot of news because I like to have a full flavor of what is being told. My problem is, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, the morning news today is no longer news. It's pretty much a show. And I see a lot of those people saying it's a show. So I'm going to assume that if they say it's a show, then that's exactly what they are. Having said that, tell me what your experience has been and kind of how you're dealing with the COVID-19 in South Carolina and your constituents and how that affects you, even going to Washington and how things are going there.
Yeah, so it has changed and disrupted how we operate in Washington. There is no doubt. In fact, tomorrow we're going to have a committee hearing with Dr. Fauci and some others in Energy and Commerce. It'll be a full committee, but it'll be a virtual hearing as well as an in-person hearing. So it'll be a quasi mixture of both people there in the committee room, but also people that are still at home on a virtual setting. And I'm going to stay at home for this one and do it virtually versus going to Washington. I went to Washington last week and participated in one from the committee room. So it's really changed the modus operandi of Washington. There are changes being made to how we vote on the House floor. If you've ever watched that, you're not going to see, at least right now, you're not going to see the huge crowds on the House floor where we're voting in blocks by alphabet. And one vote is taking over an hour for one simple vote. And then if you have a 3 or 4 vote series, you're looking at 3 or 4 hours. How are we going to get anything else done during the vote process? Whereas before, it was pretty streamlined. So you've got a lot of folks that have offered or are now voting by proxy. They do not want to travel from their home states to Washington. So Speaker Pelosi changed the rules to allow proxy voting. That means I could, as a member of Congress, I will never do this because I don't think it's constitutional, but I could give my proxy to another member who would vote for me on the House floor. I think that flies in the face of the Constitution. We're supposed to be present in voting. And so those are some of the changes there. In South Carolina and nationwide, let me just say this, the governors have acted under the guidelines of the administration in Washington. The governors have acted in the best interest, I think, of the people in their states, and they've all acted differently. But what I saw, Mike, was this concern in late February, early March, that this virus was sweeping rapidly across the globe, and it had the potential of overwhelming our healthcare system and our hospitals. That's why you saw the Mercy ship go to New York. You saw tents set up in Central Park. But once it was realized that the Mercy ship wasn't going to be needed and the tent hospitals were not going to be needed, that this virus was not going to overwhelm our health system the way it was anticipated, at that point, governors should have started lifting the stay-at-home orders. I believe governors should have started opening up their states once that realization was made. We didn't do that. It drug on really until, good golly, not all states are fully open now like South Carolina and Texas are. But we should have gotten back out. We should have gotten back to some semblance of normalcy because our economy really, really suffered from the stay-at-home orders, from the lack of retail sales, from lack of services being provided, and it's going to take a little while once the state's open for all that to kickstart. You don't cut the light switch back on of the economy like that. It takes a little while to build back up, and so I'm hoping this summer we're going to see that we saw the curve flatten. I hope we see hospitalizations and fatalities remain low, even though testing is revealing that more people have been exposed to or have COVID-19, but they're not showing any symptoms. They're not going to the hospitals. They're not overwhelming the hospitals, and the fatality rates aren't spiking, even though the COVID-19 cases have spiked. That's to be expected through increased testing. Increased testings mean you're going to find more people that have been exposed to the virus. But we're learning more and more about this virus every day. I'm not a big vaccine guy, but there may be a vaccine that's out there. I'm more about therapeutics and treatment, just like we treat the flu and other things. Learn how to treat it, learn how to help people survive it, and build some immunity to it.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we have in the United States and across the world now, in most modern countries, is the fact that we've been taking vaccines and medicines to the point we've killed the immune system. And when we were kids, when you were a kid, I was a kid, we were out in the yard and digging in the dirt and probably eating half of it, and it didn't kill us. But the thing now is, so many parents, the minute a kid starts to have a sniffle, they run to the emergency room, and I think that's been detrimental to the society as a whole. And I think I hope they get a vaccine for it. It's affected everybody. It's affected my family. My daughter. She's working in a healthcare field. Their office is closed. She's going to try to go back Thursday. She's had to take quite a bit of time off. And, a lot of the restaurants here in Dallas are having challenges too. One of our favorite restaurants, one person tests positive, they shut the thing down. And then they're going to.
And here's the other side of that is there's a lot of liability concerns now, and that from restaurants and other businesses, that if someone contracts COVID-19 and they trace it back to maybe that local franchisee or that restaurant, or maybe an auction they attended, where does the liability lie? Or is there any liability to that restaurant owner or that auctioneer? That's something I hope we work on in Congress to give some liability protection. We don't trace that liability back when somebody catches the flu. Why would we do that on COVID-19? A lot of folks don't know this about me, but my wife is a dental hygienist and she's still practicing. She's at work today and she's exposed to a lot of things. She does not get sick, really. She's exposed to so much over a 35-year career as a dental hygienist. She's built up that immunity. I think that speaks to your point that we have the ability to build an immunity up to a lot of these natural viruses that are out there, and there are thousands upon thousands of viruses that we're exposed to every day, and I don't see where COVID-19 is that different, that our bodies need to build up that immunity.
Well, as you know, for the last 8 to 10 years, actually longer than that, I guess the last 13, 14 years, I've been on an airplane almost every day during the week. Not so much on the weekend, but during the week, I could be on as many as 5 flights. When you're on that many airplanes, and you know what the air is like on airplanes, it's recirculated air for the most part, and you're breathing in everybody else. And I think that you do build up an immunity to it, because quite frankly, I have a very weak immune system. I've had chronic bronchitis for 30 years, and it doesn't take a lot to make me ill, and I've got a lung specialist, and I have to have all these inhalers now just to be able to breathe and do auctions when I do them. But I think being on all those airplanes with that many sick people, you can't tell me that I wouldn't have been a very good candidate to catch something. But I typically just don't get sick. You'll have the typical hay fever or something along that line, which that just goes with allergies. But I think you also have to be proactive too. I think you've got to in our auction school, I teach a class about how to try to do your best to stay healthy, and avoid situations that are potentially going to be bad. If you know that there's 3 kids at the party and they all got a cold or the flu, then you don't need to be carrying those kids around, because you're probably going to get something. I just think some things are just common sense, and unfortunately, as you well know, common sense is in short supply right now. And we see that on a daily basis. Have you got any figures for your district as far as how many businesses are closing, or what percentages of businesses are closing or hurting right now? They're all hurting, but actually losing. We're losing a lot of businesses here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm looking at empty strip centers and businesses that have been there for 20, 30 years. So I was just wondering how it's happening in your district on the other side of the country.
Yeah, surprisingly, South Carolina, at least in the 3rd district, has not seen that many business failures as a result of this. Now, I haven't been out and about in all 11 counties this point, but because of the Triple P program that Congress passed, a lot of businesses in South Carolina that needed to were able to tap into that money to keep those employees on, to pay some of their expenses. And our governor was very proactive. We opened maybe a little earlier, probably on the same lines of Governor Abbott in Texas, but probably opened around the same time. But the district has not, to my knowledge, experienced a tremendous downturn and closures of businesses. A lot of the restaurants were suffering, but many of the restaurants I've talked to, they did comparable numbers from their drive-through and carry-out service as they were from in-room dining. These more of the fast food places around town versus the sit-down, higher-end restaurants. They probably struggled a little more than some of the fast food restaurants. But I think in South Carolina, we've probably fared as well as any other state.
Yeah. I was in a restaurant yesterday, and it wasn't real crowded. Of course, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I just said to the guy, I said, how's business going? He said, we're getting hammered with pickups. He said, we're doing as well as we were when we were open, where people could come in and sit down. Now they are doing in-house dining now, but their to-go orders are unbelievable. And I was at another restaurant later in the evening. I had some friends in town, and literally it's just bag after bag after bag. And these are, this is not a low-end couple of restaurants. These are higher-end restaurants, probably upper tier. And they seem to be doing pretty well. Of course, it takes a lot to operate some of these businesses too. So I'm pretty sensitive to them. And I highly recommend that people do as much business with them as you can. As far as the takeout, if you don't want to go inside, just drive up and pick up the bag, and let's keep these businesses going, because I'm a very pro-business guy. You're a very pro-business guy, especially small business, because it's the backbone of the United States. We have to help these people as much as we can.
No doubt. I mean, I've done the same thing, Mike. I have patronized the local businesses and gone through the drive-through or done carry-out. Now, during this COVID-19, I've lost 23 pounds, and see, I don't know if that's near you, but
I don't
anyway.
know. Travis, you're the producer. You're going to have to tell me. Hang on just a second.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get that taken off of there.
So while they're working on that, I'll just continue. I try to.
We can hear you. We can hear you. He's working on it. Okay. Well, that's the great thing about technology, Jeff. That's why I don't run it.
There's no doubt. I went yesterday and helped my son repair a boat trailer, and we went to a couple of businesses. One of the businesses required to wear a mask before you entered. And, I don't know that there's a definitive answer about masks. I'm not a mask guy. We talked about earlier, I believe in herd immunity. I believe in building up that. I believe we're all going to be exposed to this virus at some point in time. I believe in therapeutics and treatment. But I look at wearing a mask to go in and patronize a business, just like I do my concealed weapon permit. In that, if a business has a do not enter with your concealed weapon permit, I can choose either not to go into that business and I can find somewhere else to shop, or I can go back to the car and leave my weapon inside and go in without a concealed weapon on. That is the private property and the private business's right. So it's kind of like airplanes. Airplanes can require me to wear a mask. If I want to fly, there's an alternative. I can always drive. But for the convenience, I'm going to comply with what American Airlines in general, it's who I fly, requires, and that's wear a mask. I'm not a fan of the mask, but I put a mask on yesterday to go in and buy the part we needed. I'll put a mask on to fly on American Airlines as long as they require that, and that is their right. And if I want to, partake of their service, then I'm going to meet their requirements. And so I think it's maybe a new normal, and I hate the term new normal, but I think that's kind of where we are, at least until this virus either runs its course, we find a vaccine, we get therapeutics down, or it just goes away altogether.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we live in an interesting county, Dallas County. We have a county commissioner who is well, he's very open to control. Let's just put it that way. And so he has put the order out. The commissioners have put the order out that when we're going to wear a mask if we're going to go into a business in Dallas County. It is not even an option. It's what It doesn't mean people aren't going in without a mask. I can tell you that. We're in Texas. A lot of people are going to do what they want to do, no matter what. They can always tell you to leave, but we also were told that the order has now been extended to August the 31st. Now that's a long time down the road, and so I love Dallas, Texas, but I can tell you I don't feel like I'm in the Dallas, Texas that I've lived in for 35 years, and it's just like you say, it's a different time. It may be the new norm, but I don't necessarily have to like it. And like you say, I've always got the option of going out of town or moving somewhere else. So that's always an option too, I do like going to the farm. It's a good place to get away. You don't have to worry about masks at the farm.
Pecan or pecan?
Pecan. Yeah, it's the.
You say pecan where I live.
Oh, well, I know, but you guys are just wrong. It's the Pecan Creek Ranch. Yep.
I like it. I love it.
It's a neat place to hide out, I can tell you that. I want to talk about something else. And you were very close to this situation. So on June the 14th, which is going to be an anniversary coming up, or just was, in 2017, there was a congressional baseball game in D.C., and why don't I just let you tell the story of what happened up there, and because you were there, you were a part of it, and you can tell it better than I can.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike, for bringing that up as well, because I've been in Congress for 10 years. I've played congressional baseball, game for charity for every year that I've been there. We haven't done it this year because of COVID-19. But in 2017, we were practicing for that congressional baseball game for charity, which is played at National Stadium, usually has about 15,000 people in attendance, raises a lot of money for inner city children and programs. And this was the day before the game. We were over in Alexandria at a Alexandria City Park baseball field that we practiced at. And I was a shortstop. I'm at shortstop. Ron DeSantis, who's now governor of the great state of Florida, was playing third base. He would travel out to the baseball field every morning at 6 o'clock with me. And that morning, we were standing there. We had already taken batting practice. We had taken infield. We were going through batting practice, so we were out there just to field any ball that may be hit our way. And Ron DeSantis said, when are you thinking about leaving? And I said, really, I can leave any time. And he said, if you don't mind, let's take off because I've got a meeting I can make at Capitol Hill if we leave now. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we proceeded. And as we're walking across the parking lot, we encounter a gentleman who asked me, excuse me, sir, can you tell me who is practicing today, Republicans or Democrats? And I said, this is the Republican team practicing. And he said, okay, thank you. Well, I got in my car. It was not unusual for us to see citizens walking around that field. There's a dog walking area. There's a tennis court. It's Alexandria City. There's a lot of housing right around there, and people were out exercising. The YMCA is right next door. So that wasn't unusual. So we drove off, went back to Capitol Hill. The gentleman I talked to, unbeknownst to me, was an assassin, or he had the desire to be an assassin. He left the parking lot area where we had our encounter, and he walked to his van. He went inside. He changed clothes. He loaded up some weapons that he carried. One was an SKB .308 caliber rifle that he had modified to take a detachable magazine. He had a 9mm pistol on him as well. He came out of his van, walked up behind the third base dugout, loaded his weapon, stepped out, and took his first shot across the field at the third baseman, who would have been Ron DeSantis, but instead was Trent Kelly from Mississippi. His first shot hit the chain link fence, Mike. God was in control. Trent Kelly, military, is a general in the National Guard, Mississippi, recognized the sound, hollered. People started scattering off the field. There was one exit from the baseball field, and that was by the first base dugout. Shooter was at the third base dugout. Shooter proceeded to unload across the field. One of his bullets hit a volunteer, Zach Barth, in the ankle, the leg. One of them hit my good friend Steve Scalise, the whip at the time for the majority is now the minority whip from Louisiana, hit him in the lower pelvic area in the hip, bullet cut across his lower regions, and he started crawling toward outfield, fearful for his life. The shooter then proceeded toward first base around behind home plate, fired 137 rounds across the baseball field at my colleagues, and at that time, Steve Scalise had a security detail. Two brave Capitol Hill police officers, David Bailey and Crystal Grinder, started returning fire with a shooter. The shooter hit Crystal in the leg. She went down. They continued to shoot. David Bailey returning fire with his handgun versus a rifle or a long gun. The shooter had an advantage. All David could do was try to hold him off. The shooter kept working his way around home plate, got behind a concrete building. His rifle jammed. He threw it down, took his handgun out, stepped out, started engaging David with his handgun. When David realized the rifle wasn't in play, he cut the distance. Same time, the Alexandria police officer showed up, and they were able to dispatch the shooter, who ultimately died at the hospital from the gunshot wounds from the law enforcement officers that were there to protect us. Unbeknownst to me, when I had that interaction with the shooter in the parking lot, I didn't know, that he had a list in his pocket. He had a list of 8 individuals, members of Congress, that he hoped to kill, and my name was on that list, Mike. He had my name, he had my age, he had a physical description, he had my office number in the Rayburn House office building, and he hoped to kill me and my colleagues. Either he didn't recognize me in the parking lot, or he was not able or ready to commit his act. And regardless, God was in control. God got me off that field. I live today. My life was changed at that point. I no longer live in fear. I live by faith. God does watch over us, and so He kept me and my colleagues safe by making the shooter a terrible shot. And protecting our colleagues, and having a doctor on that field, and Brad Winstrup, who was a Army doctor who had battlefield trauma techniques. He was able to apply to Steve Scalise and saved his life by stopping the blood flow with a tourniquet on his leg. Considering where the blood was flowing from and where Steve was shot, he was able to save his life. Not everybody can put that type of tourniquet on. Brad Winstrup was able to do that. So God was definitely in control that day, and I give Him all the glory and praise.
That is that's an amazing story. And that's the first time I've ever heard you tell the story. So for those that are on the show today that are watching, and they're watching it live, and of course this show will be, it's recorded, so it'll be on this site of Facebook going forward, but it's also on our YouTube channel, the Mike McGavel Jones YouTube channel. I think it's a chilling story, a really chilling story. And praise God that you're here, and we didn't have a mass loss of life that day. People don't realize the kind of people that are out there today that have an agenda. I was going to ask you earlier, before we had this conversation, if you felt safe and if you felt comfortable going to Washington, D.C., and you just answered the question. And so I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to our elected officials who are in harm's way, and many times they don't know it. Of course, you get a lot of briefings. There's a lot of security information that is provided to you guys. It's typically caught, earlier. They have ways of keeping up with things today. People do monitor the Facebook pages and some of the people that are thinking about doing bad things, and they're catching them before they do the act. But, God bless you, Jeff, and I'm glad you're my friend. I appreciate what you do. And I wanted to mention too, you've been married to your wife Melody for over 30 years now. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and we were high school sweethearts, and dated for about 5 years before we got married. So I don't know my life really without her.
Yeah, and you have 3 sons. and always great to see you, and proud to have you at that event. Of course, we did not have the event this year. Ducks Unlimited, like many other organizations, has had to postpone a lot of their fundraising opportunities, and they're doing some virtual things. They have the national convention coming up in Orlando here in a few months, and I'm not even sure that I'll be able to do it for the first time in over 10 years because of scheduling difficulties. But Jeff Duncan, I just want to tell you, and I'm going to close this with my daily devotional, which I do enjoy reading every day, and I just want you to know that we're proud of you and for all the things that you've done. We're proud that you're an auctioneer and have made a living in that. But even more so, we're proud of you for being a good person and being a man of Christ, and for serving the people of your state and for the United States of America. And we look forward to seeing you do many more great things and continuing to serve and do what's best for the country. And that's one of my normal prayers is to ask for the president to make good decisions, and the House and the senators, and our regional representatives, and then also our local government and the State House. So I want to thank you for being on, and if you'll allow me, I'm going to close this out by just reading a little bit, and then we'll sign off. And Travis, thank you for a great show today. Jeff, do you have anything you want to say before you go?
Just thank you, Mike. And again, it'd be an honorary Texan. I love Texas. I love Texas football, whether it's Texas Longhorns or the Aggies. I love it all. I love everything Texas. I love Mike Jones. And thank you for your witness as well to all the folks that watch you. They know you're a man of God and a follower of Jesus Christ. So thank you so much for having me on. I look forward to the devotional, and I look forward to being in the studio with you sometime in Dallas, Texas.
That'll be awesome. Thank you, Jeff. So this is from Jesus Calling, and this is my morning ritual, and here's the reading for today. Thank me for the very things that are troubling you. You are on the brink of rebellion, precariously close to shaking your fist in my face. You are tempted to indulge in just a little complaining about my treatment of you. But once you step over that line, torrents of rage and self-pity can sweep you away. The best protection against this indulgence is thanksgiving. It is impossible to thank me and curse me at the same time. Thanking me for trials will feel awkward and contrived at first, but if you persist, your thankful words, prayed in faith, will eventually make a difference in your heart. Thankfulness awakens you to my presence, which overshadows all your problems. And that's from Psalm 116, verse 17, and Philippians 4, and verse 4 through 6. Jeff Duncan, you're a delight. I look forward to seeing you either here in Texas or up in Washington, D.C., and look forward to another Capitol Hill Day. Travis, great show. God bless you. See you, Jeff. And for everybody that's been a part of this one, I'm Mike Jones, Mike McGavel Jones. We love having you here every week. We'll see you next time from Dallas, Texas. Till next time, we bid you adieu.